On a stormy night, he entered the room without turning on the light. He thought he was going to meet a familiar woman. But the one lying there was the young virgin Maid, trembling in silence. If you enjoy love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave your comment telling us where you are listening from. In the Blue Ridge Mountains, where mist mingles with the green of the mountains and time seems suspended between past and present, stands Westwood Manor, a century-old property of stone and noble wood, with tall windows that rarely open and corridors that echo with ancient memories. It is there that Thomas Walker lives, 54 years old, one of the richest men in the country, owner of an empire built on mining and technology, but also on secrets that few know and decisions that have cost him much more than money could ever buy. Widowed for 12 years, Thomas is an enigmatic figure in the American business landscape. Calculating, introspective, with the look of someone carrying the weight of choices that cannot be undone. Helena, the woman he loved with the intensity of someone loving for the first time at 40, disappeared on a stormy night that swept through the mountain region. She left behind only an emerald ring on the stone veranda of the main house and an absence that transformed into obsession. The body was never found, despite searches that lasted months. The county sheriff closed the case as suicide. He never fully believed that version, but he also couldn't prove otherwise. The manor became his voluntary prison. Thomas lives trapped in a grief without a body, visiting every night the rooms where he was once happy. He lies down in beds where no one sleeps anymore, walks through corridors where the walls hold echoes of laughter that no longer sounds, and keeps an entire wing of the property locked since his wife's death. Inside, according to the manor's staff, time has stopped. Paintings covered with white sheets, letters torn and taped back together with transparent tape, and a full-length mirror that was broken on the night of the disappearance and that he himself reconstructed piece by piece, like someone trying to mend a life that shattered irreversibly. Employees don't last long at the manor. The heavy atmosphere, the stern boss, and rumors about the closed wing drive away even those most in need of work. So when the domestic employment agency in Charlottesville calls offering a new candidate, Thomas doesn't even bother to interview her personally. He leaves everything in the hands of his butler, Mr. Joseph, who has been managing the house for more than 20 years and knows the boss's moods like no one else. That's how Amelia Sanders arrives, 21 years old, a young woman from rural West Virginia, from a small town where everyone knows each other, and stories repeat from generation to generation. Raised by her paternal grandmother after her mother abandoned her at 5 to try life in New York City, Amelia carries a kind of serenity that isn't passivity but contained strength. A silent resistance she learned early, when she understood that the world isn't always kind to poor and beautiful girls. Discreet, reserved, with a shyness that hides a sharp intelligence, she has dark eyes that seem to hold secrets too old for her age. There's something about her that draws attention without asking for it, a natural beauty that dispenses with artifice, a dignity not learned from books. And a detail she keeps as an intimate vow. At 21, she still preserves her virginity, not out of fear or repression, but from a deep conviction that giving one's body is a sacred act, deserving of waiting, deserving of certainty. Her grandmother, Grandma Connie, raised her in the Catholic faith but also in the folk wisdom that comes from women who survive everything. "Girl," she always said, "our body is a temple but also a weapon. There's a time to use one, a time to use the other. The important thing is knowing which time is which." Amelia grew up understanding that being a woman meant navigating between dangers and opportunities, between her own strength and the vulnerability the world insisted on seeing in them. When she arrived at the manor on a March morning with a small suitcase and a worn leather purse, Amelia felt something strange in the air. It wasn't just the mist descending from the mountains, nor the smell of eucalyptus mixed with the humidity of the forest. It was something deeper, as if the house itself breathed an ancient melancholy. Mr. Joseph received her at the main entrance, a man with greying hair and cordial manners, who quickly explained the rules of the house. "The manor is large, girl, but there are places you shouldn't go. The east wing is always closed by the boss's orders. He's a reserved man, doesn't like noise or questions. Do your job properly. Don't meddle where you're not called, and you'll get along fine." The butler's voice was gentle, but there was weight in his words, a warning disguised as advice. Amelia nodded in silence, observing the imposing architecture of the house. Large windows with dark wooden frames, wide plank floors that creaked underfoot, high ceilings decorated with crystal chandeliers that seemed like silent witnesses to better times. There was a solemnity to the manor that made her feel small, but also awakened a curiosity she knew to be dangerous. In the first few days, she barely saw the boss. Thomas circulated around the property like a shadow, always dressed in dark clothes, always with a furrowed brow, always carrying that aura of a man who has lost more than he could bear. When they crossed paths in the corridors, he barely raised his eyes. She lowered hers in an automatic reflex of respect she had learned since childhood. But Amelia had attentive eyes and soon noticed details that others ignored. The table always set for 2 people, even though Thomas dined alone. The expensive wine opened every night, from which he drank only a few sips before abandoning the glass half full. His footsteps through the corridors during the early hours, always at the same time, always in the direction of the forbidden wing, and especially the way he stood in front of the closed door, stayed there for minutes that seemed eternal, and then returned to his room with shoulders even more hunched. The routine of the house was simple, but laden with symbolism. Amelia woke at 5 in the morning, prepared the strong coffee that Thomas drank in silence, took care of cleaning the permitted rooms, organized the meals, and retired at the end of the day to her small room on the 2nd floor. It was a monotonous life, but there was something in the atmosphere of the manor that kept her constantly alert, as if at any moment something could happen. Mr. Joseph had mentioned that she was the 5th employee in 2 years. The others didn't last more than a few months, all resigning without clear explanations. They said the house was too heavy, the butler had commented with a humorless smile, that they had nightmares, that they heard strange noises, nonsense from people without education. But Amelia noticed that even Mr. Joseph avoided circulating alone through the house after dark. The 3rd week of March brought a storm unlike any seen in the region for a long time. The winds howled among the century-old trees that surrounded the property, and the rain beat against the windows with a violence that made the entire structure of the house groan. Around 10 at night, when Amelia was organizing the dinner dishes in the kitchen, a particularly strong lightning strike hit the transformers in the region, and the manor plunged into total darkness. The emergency generator didn't work. Mr. Joseph had gone to bed early, complaining of back pain. Amelia fumbled through the drawers until she found a flashlight, but the battery was weak, offering only a yellowish beam that barely illuminated a few feet in front of her. She decided to go up to her room and wait for the storm to pass, but halfway up the staircase she heard a noise coming from the main living room. It was Thomas, clearly intoxicated, talking to himself, or perhaps not to himself. There were moments when he paused, as if waiting for answers that didn't come. Amelia hesitated. It wasn't her business, but there was something desperate in his voice, a raw pain that touched her in an unexpected way. She decided to check if he was okay, if he needed help. The room was plunged in shadows. Through the window, lightning sporadically illuminated the environment, creating plays of light that distorted the furniture and made the curtains seem like dancing ghosts. Thomas was standing in front of the unlit fireplace, holding a half-empty bottle of whiskey. When she approached, he turned abruptly, his eyes glazed by alcohol and by something she couldn't identify. "Helena?" His voice came out hoarse, full of painful hope. "You came back?" Amelia felt her heart accelerate. She knew that Helena was the name of his dead wife, but she had never seen Thomas in such a vulnerable state. He approached, staggering, and before she could say anything, his hands found her face in the dark. A gentle touch, almost reverent, like someone touching something sacred and fragile. "I knew you would come back to me," he murmured, and there were so many unshed tears in those words that Amelia felt paralyzed. His heart beat erratically against her chest, which she could feel through his shirt wet with sweat. The smell of whiskey mingled with his masculine perfume, creating a combination that was both repulsive and magnetic. She should have said something. She should have moved away. She should have turned on the flashlight and shown him who she really was. But there was something in the way he touched her, with such care, such need, that left her mute. It was as if he were clinging to her, as the only thing that still made sense in the world. Thomas's hands moved to her shoulders, then to her back, in a desperate embrace. She could feel his body trembling, and she didn't know if it was from the cold, the alcohol, or the emotion. The storm outside seemed less violent than the whirlwind of feelings that took over the room at that moment. "Forgive me," he whispered against her hair. "Forgive everything I did, everything I didn't do. Forgive me for letting you go." His voice was broken, carrying a guilt that he seemed to have carried for years. Amelia closed her eyes, feeling his hot tears falling on her skin. At that moment, it didn't matter that she was just the maid. It didn't matter that he had confused her with someone else. There was a raw humanity in that embrace, a need so deep that she felt compelled to respond. Her arms closed around him and she let him cry. Cry for the 12 years of solitude, for the guilt that consumed him, for the woman he had lost and never managed to truly bury. It was a masculine cry, contained and violent, that came out in choppy waves and left his body convulsing against hers. They stayed like that for a time that could have been minutes or hours. The storm continued outside, but inside a strange quietness had settled, as if time itself had stopped to witness this moment of absolute vulnerability. When he finally pulled away, it was still too dark for them to see each other clearly. Thomas held her face between his hands once more, his thumbs caressing her wet cheeks. She had cried too, without realizing it. "Don't abandon me again," he pleaded, his voice still choked. "Promise you won't abandon me again." Amelia opened her mouth to speak, to explain, but at that moment the light returned suddenly, flooding the room with a cruel brightness. Thomas blinked several times trying to focus, and when he finally saw her, really saw her, the shock was visible on his face. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas retreated as if he had been punched, his wide eyes fixed on Amelia's face. Reality fell on him like a bucket of cold water, and she could see the exact moment when drunkenness gave way to lucidity, when hope transformed into horror. "My God," he murmured, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "My God, what have I done?" His voice came out strangled, carrying a shame that seemed physically painful. Amelia remained motionless, still feeling the ghost of his embrace, the warmth of the tears that had moistened her skin. Part of her wanted to console him, tell him everything was fine, that nothing serious had happened, but the more sensible part knew that something fundamental had changed between them in those minutes of darkness. "Mr. Walker, she began, but he raised his hand, interrupting her. "No," he said, his voice already recovering its usual firmness, as if he were desperately trying to rebuild the wall that had crumbled. "Don't say anything. This shouldn't have happened. I wasn't in my right mind." He moved back a few more steps, creating a physical distance that seemed to symbolize much more than mere feet of wooden floor. Amelia observed the changes in his face, the mask of coldness returning to place, the tense muscles, the clenched jaw, but she had seen what was underneath, and that vision could not be erased. "I'm going to increase your salary," he said abruptly, avoiding looking directly at her, "and I prefer that we don't comment on what happened, to anyone." The offer of money hit her like a slap. Is that how he saw what had happened? As something that could be bought, silenced, forgotten? Amelia felt a hot anger rise in her chest, mixed with a disappointment she didn't expect to feel. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice firmer than she imagined herself capable of, "and I'm not a gossip." Thomas finally faced her, and for a second she saw genuine surprise in his eyes. He probably wasn't used to employees who refused money or who confronted him, even if politely. "Then what do you want?" he asked, and there was something dangerous in the question, as if he were testing her. Amelia hesitated. What did she want? To understand why his embrace had affected her so deeply. To know more about the dead woman who still inhabited that house like a ghost. or simply to be able to look at him without feeling this strange mixture of compassion and disturbance. "I want to work," she answered finally. "That's all, work and be respected." Something passed across Thomas's face, perhaps approval, perhaps distrust. He nodded once and left the room without another word, leaving her alone with the echo of her own confused thoughts. The days that followed were filled with almost unbearable tension. Thomas returned to his previous behavior, distant, formal, almost ghostly in the way he moved through the house. But now there was something different. Amelia felt his eyes on her when he thought he wasn't being observed. During breakfast, she served his plate and could swear he took a few seconds longer to pick up the cup, as if making sure their fingers wouldn't accidentally touch. She had changed too. She found herself thinking about that embrace at random moments of the day, remembering his smell, the way his masculine body fit against hers. It was disturbing to discover that she missed something that had lasted only a few minutes and that had been born from a misunderstanding. The routine of the house continued, but now it was loaded with subtexts. When Amelia cleaned the room, where the encounter had happened, she felt as if the air still held echoes of that night. When she prepared dinner and saw Thomas sit alone at the table, too large for one person, she felt a twinge of something she couldn't name. It was Mr. Joseph who first noticed the change in atmosphere. "Are you all right, girl?" he asked one afternoon, while helping fold bed linens. "You seem worried." "I'm fine, Mr. Joseph," she lied. "It's just, the house is very big. Sometimes I feel too small for it." The butler studied her with experienced eyes. The manor has that effect on people, especially when it carries so many memories. He paused as if deciding how much he should speak. "The boss wasn't like this before, you know, before the tragedy." Amelia feigned disinterest, but her ears perked up. What was he like? Different. Younger, of course, but not just that. He laughed. He received friends. The house was always full of people, of music. Mrs. Helena loved parties. The butler's nostalgic smile faded. After what happened, it was as if he had died with her. "Were you here on the night she died?" Joseph shook his head. "I had gone to visit my sister in Charlottesville. When I returned, it was already too late. I found the boss alone, completely distraught. He couldn't even form sentences properly. He just kept repeating that she had disappeared, that there had been an argument, that he had drunk too much and fallen asleep." An argument? From what I could understand later, yes. Mrs. Helena was acting strange in the weeks before she died. Nervous, scared of something. The boss tried to talk to her, but, well, he was never very good with words when the subject was feelings. Amelia absorbed this information, feeling pieces of a puzzle slowly fitting together in her mind. And they never found the body? Never. They searched for months. The boss hired private detectives, offered rewards, moved heaven and earth. Nothing. Joseph sighed. "I think that's what destroyed him the most. Not being able to bury her properly. Not being able to be certain of what really happened." That night, as she prepared for bed, Amelia found herself imagining what Helena was like. From the fragments she had heard, she seemed to have been a vibrant woman, full of life. What kind of argument had she had with Thomas? What could a rich and loved woman be frightened about? When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of a female figure walking through the corridors of the manor, looking for something she had lost. In the dream, the woman turned to her and had her own face, but the eyes were different, ancient, sad, full of untold secrets. She woke with her heart racing, the strange sensation that she wasn't alone in the room. But when she turned on the lamp, there was no one there. Just the shadows dancing on the walls and the distant sound of footsteps through the corridors, Thomas making his nightly pilgrimage to the door of the Forbidden Wing. Amelia's curiosity about the Forbidden Wing grew each day. During her tasks, she caught herself looking in the direction of the closed corridors, imagining what secrets were kept there. The main door of the East Wing was solid wood, with an antique lock that seemed not to have been opened for years. But one April morning, while cleaning the adjacent corridor, she noticed something strange. The lock had been oiled. Someone had recently taken care of it, and the wood around the handle was smooth from frequent use. Thomas didn't just visit. The door, he entered there regularly, but when and why? The answer came on a night when she woke up thirsty and went down to the kitchen for water. It was almost 2 in the morning, and the house was immersed in the typical silence of the mountain dawn. But as she returned to her room, she heard the unmistakable sound of a door opening. She hid behind a wooden column and saw Thomas emerging from the forbidden wing, carrying something in his hands. It was a dress, a blue silk dress that he held with as much care as if it were made of crystal. Amelia held her breath when he stopped right in front of her hiding place, raised the fabric to his face and inhaled deeply, as if seeking a perfume that time had taken away. The scene was both touching and disturbing. There was something obsessive in the way he held the clothing, in the manner his fingers caressed the silk, as if it still held the presence of the woman who had worn it. Amelia felt like an intruder, witnessing a moment of intimacy that didn't belong to her, but she couldn't move away. Thomas remained there for several minutes before returning to the closed wing with the dress. When the door closed again, Amelia ran to her room, her heart beating erratically. For the first time since arriving at the manor, she felt afraid. Not of Thomas exactly, but of the intensity of what she had witnessed. That wasn't normal grief, it was obsession. The following days were marked by a different tension. Amelia found herself observing Thomas with different eyes, looking for signs of the disturbed man she had seen in the early morning. During the day, he seemed normal, distant but functional. He took care of business by phone, received financial reports, made business decisions with his usual coldness. But she knew there was another man hidden underneath, a man who couldn't let the dead rest. The situation became complicated when she began to dream about Helena. They weren't normal dreams, but vivid visions where the dead woman walked through the manor, always looking for something. In the most disturbing dream, Helena was standing in front of the broken mirror in the forbidden wing, trying to reconstruct her image in the glued shards. "He won't let me leave," Helena said in the dream, her voice echoing as if coming from very far away. "He won't let me rest." Amelia woke up drenched in sweat, with the inexplicable certainty that Helena hadn't committed suicide. She had been murdered, and Thomas knew it. The confirmation of her suspicions came unexpectedly. While cleaning Thomas's office, something she did only when he left the manor, she found a drawer ajar. Inside there was a thick dossier with the name Helena Walker written by hand. Her heart raced. She knew she shouldn't, but curiosity was stronger. The dossier contained reports from private detectives, police files, photographs of the disappearance scene, and a series of letters that Helena had written in the weeks before her death. Amelia, read the letters with growing horror. Helena was being watched. She felt persecuted. She suspected someone was trying to slowly poison her. "Thomas doesn't believe me," said one of the letters. "He thinks I'm becoming paranoid, that it's stress. But I know I'm not imagining it. I found strange medications in my tea. My food tastes bitter. And she is always here, always watching me with those cold eyes." She? Who was she? The answer was in the last letter, written 2 days before the disappearance. "Claire is back. She said she came to help with the business. But I know why she's really here. It's because of what I discovered about her past with Thomas. If anything happens to me, don't trust Claire." Amelia felt a chill. Claire. She had heard this name several times in Thomas's phone conversations. She was his lawyer and old friend, a woman who had been handling the legal aspects of the Walker family business for more than 15 years. She continued reading and found another disturbing detail. Helena mentioned having hidden something behind the glued mirror, something that would prove her suspicions. And on the night of the disappearance, she had planned to confront Claire with this evidence. "If I die tonight," said the last line of the letter, "it wasn't suicide. It was her." Amelia's hands trembled as she closed the dossier. Helena had been murdered, and Thomas had suspected it for 12 years. But why hadn't he done anything? Why did he keep Claire close if he suspected her? The answer came when she read the detective reports. There was no concrete evidence. Helena's suspicions could be interpreted as paranoia. And Claire had a perfect alibi for the night of the disappearance. She was in Chicago at a legal conference with hundreds of witnesses. But there was a handwritten note in the margin of one of the reports, in Thomas's handwriting. Claire knew about the life insurance. Claire had the keys to the house. Claire knew Helena's habits better than anyone. Amelia closed the drawer with trembling hands, trying to process everything she had discovered. She was living in the house of a man who suspected his wife had been murdered by someone he still kept close. And worse, she herself was beginning to feel attracted to this man, despite all the warning signs. That night, she could barely sleep. She lay thinking about Helena, about the letters, about the blue dress that Thomas carried like a relic, and she wondered if she herself wasn't walking toward the same fate, if her presence at the manor wasn't awakening dangerous jealousies in Claire. As if the universe were responding to her fears, the next morning Mr. Joseph sought her out, with news that made her blood freeze. "Miss Claire is coming to spend a few days here at the manor," he announced. "She arrives tomorrow afternoon. The boss asked to prepare the guest room and for you to take special care with her meals." The butler paused, studying Amelia's pale face. "Any problem, girl?" "No," she lied. "No problem." But as she went up to her room, a single certainty echoed in her mind. Claire was coming back, and this time Amelia would be the target. Claire Mitchell arrived at the manor on an autumn afternoon when the sun was already beginning to hide, behind the mountains, tinting the sky with orange tones that contrasted with the mist rising from the valley. Amelia saw her get out of a black Mercedes, elegant and imposing even in her early 50s. Blonde hair perfectly arranged in a low bun, expensive clothes that screamed urban sophistication, and a posture that demonstrated absolute self-confidence. From the kitchen window, Amelia observed the reunion between Claire and Thomas. There was a familiar intimacy between them, an ease of gestures that spoke of years of coexistence. Claire touched his arm when greeting him, held the handshake a few seconds longer than necessary, smiled in a way that seemed to hold shared secrets. Thomas, in turn, seemed more relaxed than Amelia had seen him since her arrival at the manor. "So, you're the new maid," said Claire when Amelia was introduced at the entrance of the house. Her voice was polite, but her blue eyes examined her like a predator studying its prey. "Very young. I hope you're competent." "Amelia has been doing very well," Thomas answered, and there was something in the way he said her name that made Claire raise an eyebrow almost imperceptibly. During dinner, Amelia served the table with maximum discretion, trying to become invisible while the two talked about business, corporate policies, and people they knew in common. But she constantly felt the weight of Claire's gaze upon her, a scrutiny that made her uncomfortable. "The house is exactly as it's always been," Claire commented, delicately cutting a piece of salmon. "You've never changed anything, Thomas. Not even after so much time." "Why would I change?" His answer was dry, almost defensive. "Maybe because living in the past isn't healthy," Claire said softly, but there was a firmness beneath the words. "Helena has been gone for 12 years. Maybe it's time to—" "I don't want to discuss this," Thomas cut her off, his voice carrying a clear warning. Claire raised her hands in surrender, but Amelia noticed the satisfied smile she couldn't completely disguise. It was as if she were testing the waters, seeing how far she could push. After dinner, while collecting the plates, Amelia heard Claire suggest they have a cognac in the library. "Like in the old days," she said, and there was a calculated nostalgia in her voice that made Amelia shiver. In the days that followed, Claire established a routine that clearly intended to mark territory. She woke up early and had coffee with Thomas, spent hours locked in the office with him resolving business matters, and in the evening always found excuses to prolong their time together. It was subtle, but Amelia perceived the strategy. Claire was repositioning herself as an indispensable part of Thomas's life. But the most disturbing were the seemingly innocent comments Claire dropped during meals. Observations about how the house needed more experienced hands to care for it, how certain people didn't understand the complexity of managing a property like that, how it was risky to trust strangers when one had as private a life as Thomas's. Amelia felt she was being systematically discredited, but in such a subtle way that it would be impossible to prove. Claire never attacked her directly. She merely planted seeds of doubt in Thomas's mind with the precision of a surgeon. The situation reached a critical point on the third night. Amelia had retired early, but woke around midnight with a terrible thirst. She went down to the kitchen for water, and on her way back heard voices coming from the library. The door was ajar, and she immediately recognized the voices of Thomas and Claire. "You need to be more careful," Claire was saying, her voice low but laden with urgency. "This girl isn't like the others. She observes, asks questions. Joseph told me she's been very curious about Helena." "So what?" Thomas's voice sounded tired. "Everyone who works here gets curious. It's natural." "No, Thomas, this is different. I see the way she looks at you. And especially how you look at her." There was a loaded pause. "You can't get emotionally involved with a maid, not now when we're so close to—" "Close to what?" "To you finally being able to overcome the past. To us being able to—" Claire's voice became softer, almost intimate. "Thomas, we have history. We understand each other. You don't need to complicate yourself with a girl who barely knows life." Amelia felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Claire wasn't just trying to remove her from the job. She was trying to take her place in Thomas's life. "Claire, we've already talked about this," said Thomas, but his voice didn't sound as firm as the words. "We talked, yes, and you always avoid the subject, but you can't run forever." Claire paused. "I've been by your side during the worst moments. When Helena died, when you almost went crazy with guilt, when everyone thought you had something to do with her disappearance. I defended you, supported you, never abandoned you. I know that, and I'm grateful. I don't want your gratitude, Thomas. I never did. I've loved you for more than 15 years. Before her, during your marriage, and after she was gone. I've always been here waiting for you to be ready to really see me." The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia held her breath, waiting for Thomas's response, but he said nothing. "This girl is confusing you," Claire continued. "She's young, beautiful, and you're projecting things onto her that don't exist. You're trying to relive something that died 12 years ago. But that's not healthy, Thomas, and it's dangerous." "So dangerous how?" "For you, for her, for all of us." Claire's voice gained a hardness that made Amelia shrink. "You know very well that you can't afford the luxury of having another scandal. Your reputation still hasn't fully recovered from the first. What if this girl decides to blackmail you? If she discovers things she shouldn't discover? If she starts asking the same questions Helena was asking?" Amelia felt her blood freeze, the same questions Helena was asking. Claire was practically admitting that there was something to be hidden. "Helena never asked questions," said Thomas, but there was an uncertainty in his voice that didn't go unnoticed. "No? Then why do you drink every night? Why can't you enter the East Wing without having anxiety attacks? Why do you keep that broken mirror glued together as if it were an altar?" Claire sighed dramatically. "You know very well that Helena was becoming paranoid in the last months, that she was seeing things where there was nothing, and you know that in the end." "Don't finish that sentence." "In the end, she was threatening to expose secrets that could destroy you, destroy us both, and you know very well what that meant." Amelia covered her mouth to hold back a scream. Claire was blackmailing Thomas with information about Helena's own death. And worse, he seemed to be allowing himself to be manipulated. "I'll fire the girl tomorrow," Thomas finally said, his voice defeated. "No," Claire responded quickly. "It would be too obvious. Leave it to me. I know how to handle the problem in a way that won't raise suspicions." Amelia didn't wait to hear more. She ran up to her room, her heart beating so hard she was sure it could be heard throughout the house. Claire was planning something against her, and Thomas had agreed. She was in real danger. She spent the rest of the night sleepless, planning her escape. But when the sun rose, a different determination had taken hold of her. She wouldn't run. She would discover the truth about what had happened to Helena, and she would prove that Claire was a murderer. The opportunity Amelia was waiting for arose 2 days later, when Claire announced she needed to go to Charlottesville to resolve some banking matters, and Thomas had to travel unexpectedly to Chicago. Because of a crisis in one of his companies, for the first time in weeks, she would have the manor practically to herself, with only Mr. Joseph, who would spend the day in town shopping. The moment Thomas's car disappeared on the winding road that led to the city, Amelia ran to the office. Her first stop was the drawer where she had found Helena's dossier, but this time she searched for something specific: the keys to the forbidden wing. She ransacked every compartment, every folder, every possible hiding place, until she found a small set of antique keys hidden inside a fake book. Her hands trembled as she headed to the East Wing. 12 years of mysteries were about to be revealed, and she didn't know if she was prepared for what she would find. The key turned in the lock with a dull click, and the door opened with a creak that echoed through the empty corridors like a lament. The smell that hit her was of dead flowers, rancid perfume, and something indefinable that made her stomach turn. The wing was preserved like a macabre museum. Paintings covered with white sheets, furniture with protective covers, and a layer of dust that suggested that not even Thomas entered there regularly, contrary to what she had thought. The first room was a feminine living room, decorated in tones of blue and white, with delicate furniture and details that screamed good taste and refinement. There were photographs everywhere: Helena smiling on trips, Helena and Thomas at elegant parties, Helena alone in poses that showed a woman conscious of her own beauty. But it was in the main bedroom that Amelia found what really mattered. The double bed was unmade, as if someone had slept there recently. There were clothes scattered over an armchair, women's clothes that seemed to have been placed there carefully, as if waiting for someone to return to wear them. And then she saw the mirror. It was a full-length mirror with a gold frame that had been broken into hundreds of pieces and then glued back together with transparent tape. The result was a fragmented surface that reflected multiple distorted images of whoever looked in it. Amelia approached, and for a frightening moment had the impression that she saw not only her own reflection, but also Helena's ghost looking over her shoulder. She remembered the letter. Helena had hidden something behind the glued mirror. Carefully, Amelia began to examine the back of the furniture. It didn't take long to find an envelope attached with adhesive tape to the lower part of the mirror. Inside the envelope were photographs that made her blood freeze: Claire and Thomas in intimate situations, clearly taken without their knowledge. The photos were old, some dated more than 15 years ago, that is, from before Thomas's marriage to Helena. But the most disturbing were the most recent ones, taken just a few months before Helena's disappearance. Along with the photos, there was a letter written in Helena's nervous handwriting. If someone is reading this, it's because my suspicions were confirmed and something happened to me. Claire is not who she appears to be. She and Thomas have been having an affair for years, since before our marriage. I discovered it by chance when I found old correspondence kept in his office. At first, I thought it was a thing of the past, but then I began to notice signs. Strange. Calls, business trips that coincided with Claire's, the way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching. I confronted Thomas 3 weeks ago. He denied everything, said I was imagining things, that Claire was just a friend and partner. But I knew he was lying. I began to investigate on my own and discovered that Claire has access to all the family bank accounts, that she was the one who suggested I take out a high life insurance policy right after the wedding, and that she has keys to all the rooms in the house. Even more frightening, I discovered she has training in chemistry, something she never mentioned. And in recent weeks I've been feeling strange, dizziness, nausea, a constant feeling that I'm being watched. I found strange substances in my tea, in my perfume, even in my toothpaste. Claire is trying to drive me crazy, or kill me, slowly. Thomas doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm having a nervous breakdown, that jealousy is making me see things that don't exist. But I'm not crazy. I have proof. I have these photos, I have samples of the substances I found. I have recordings of her phone conversations. If something happens to me, look for Claire Mitchell. She has killed before, researched the death of the first wife of her client, businessman, Richard Fontaine, 10 years ago. It was filed as suicide, but the circumstances were very similar to what is happening to me. Claire is not just my husband's lover. She is a murderer. Amelia's hands trembled so much that she could barely hold the paper. Helena wasn't paranoid. She was being systematically poisoned by the woman who was now trying to do the same thing to her. She continued searching and found a small vial, almost empty, with remnants of a colorless liquid. A handwritten label said, "Sample. Morning. Tea, March 15th. The date was 3 days before Helena's disappearance. Amelia put everything back in the envelope and was about to leave when she heard the sound of a car arriving. Her heart raced. Claire had returned earlier than expected, and she was still in the forbidden wing with the evidence in her hands. She ran to the window and saw Claire getting out of the car with an expression she had never seen before: cold, calculating, dangerous. It was as if the mask of urban elegance had fallen, revealing something much darker underneath. Amelia quickly locked the wing and ran to her room, hiding the envelope under the mattress. When Claire entered the house, she was in the kitchen, pretending to organize the groceries as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I thought you were in Charlottesville," said Amelia, trying to keep her voice casual. "I changed my mind," Claire replied, her blue eyes studying every detail of Amelia's face. "I decided to come back early. I hope you enjoyed your time alone well." There was something in the way she said alone that made Amelia realize that Claire knew exactly where she had been. Perhaps there were cameras in the house. Perhaps Claire had lied about her trip from the beginning, waiting to see what Amelia would do when she felt safe. "Of course," said Amelia, forcing a smile. "I cleaned the whole house. Everything is in order." "Good, because I was thinking, what about preparing a special dinner for when Thomas returns? Something he really likes. You can cook, can't you?" The question sounded innocent, but Amelia caught the threat beneath the words. Claire was offering an opportunity for her to prepare her own last meal. "Yes, I can cook," she answered. "Perfect, then we'll work together. I have some special seasonings that I brought from Chicago. Seasonings that give an unforgettable flavor to dishes." Claire smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered its prey. Amelia realized she had a few hours to decide what to do. She could try to escape, but Claire would certainly prevent it. She could wait for Thomas to return, but he wouldn't believe her. Claire had already planted enough seeds of doubt in his mind. Or she could confront Claire directly, using the evidence she had found. It was a risky bet, but perhaps it was her only chance to get out of that situation alive, and to do justice for Helena. The dinner that Claire proposed transformed into a macabre dance of disguises and hidden intentions. Amelia cooked under the watchful eye of the older woman, who pretended to help, while suspicious seasonings appeared and disappeared from the counter with rehearsed naturalness. Each of Claire's gestures was calculated. Each smile carried a veiled threat. "You have delicate hands," Claire commented, observing Amelia cutting vegetables. Helena had them too. She loved cooking for Thomas in the first years of marriage. Her voice carried a venomous nostalgia. Of course, later she started to become paranoid about everything. She thought someone was poisoning her food. How absurd. "Don't you think?" Amelia continued cutting, trying to keep her hands steady. "It must have been difficult for Mr. Walker to deal with that. Very difficult, especially because she started making terrible accusations against me. Said I was trying to separate them, that I wanted to take her place. Just imagine." Claire laughed, but the sound came out forced. "A successful woman like me, with my own career, my independence, would want to steal a friend's husband." The hypocrisy in Claire's voice was almost palpable. Amelia realized that the woman was testing her reactions, looking for signs that she knew more than she should. "Sometimes jealousy makes people imagine things," Amelia said carefully. "Exactly. And Helena was very jealous. She couldn't accept that Thomas had close friends, especially intelligent women who could talk to him about business, about things she didn't understand." Claire approached the counter, almost touching shoulders with Amelia. "You're not like that, are you? Jealous?" "I have no reason to be." "Of course not. You're just the maid." The phrase came out loaded with venom disguised as sweetness. "Although, I've noticed that Thomas has been treating you differently, more attentively than he normally treats the staff." Amelia felt danger approaching like a storm. Claire was building a narrative, preparing the ground to justify what she intended to do. "Mr. Walker is a respectful employer," she responded. "Respectful, yes, but also vulnerable. Men like him, who have suffered traumatic losses, sometimes cling to the first people who show kindness. It's almost a survival instinct." Claire picked up a small bottle of seasoning and swung it distractedly. "The problem is when certain people take advantage of that vulnerability." "What do you mean?" "Oh, you know, young and beautiful women who perceive the financial potential of a rich and lonely man, who start asking questions about the past, showing excessive interest in the details of his life, who might even stage small scenarios to awaken male compassion." Amelia's heart accelerated. Claire was indirectly accusing her of being an opportunist, building the perfect narrative to justify anything that might happen later. "I would never do that," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. "Of course not, dear. You seem like a decent girl." Claire uncapped the bottle and poured a pinch of the seasoning into the pan. The smell was strange, chemical, disguised under herbal aromas. But sometimes appearances are deceiving. Helena seemed decent too at first. The seasoning, that was it. Claire was poisoning the food right in front of her, using Amelia's own presence as an alibi. If something happened later, she could always claim that the maid had helped prepare the meal. "I think it's seasoned enough," Amelia said quickly, trying to take the pan off the heat. "No, it's not. Trust me, I have more experience." Claire firmly held the spoon, stirring the contents with slow, deliberate movements. "You know, Helena made the mistake of distrusting me. She started asking inconvenient questions, investigating things that were none of her business. She thought she could blackmail me with information she misinterpreted." "And what happened to her?" Claire stopped stirring and looked directly at Amelia. For the first time, the mask of civility fell completely, revealing something cold and relentless in her blue eyes. "She discovered that you don't mess with someone who has much more to lose than she does." The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken threats. Amelia realized that Claire was confessing, certain that she wouldn't live to tell anyone. "You killed Helena," said Amelia, her voice coming out lower than she intended. "I got rid of a problem." Helena was about to destroy Thomas's life with her paranoid fantasies. She was going to tell everyone about our relationship, tarnish his reputation, ruin our business. I couldn't allow that. "So you poisoned her." "I helped her find peace. It was more merciful than she deserved." Claire went back to stirring the food, as if they were discussing the weather. "She died believing that Thomas had discovered everything, that he himself had put the poison in her tea. It was cruel but necessary. He needed to carry the guilt, so he would never try to investigate me." Claire's coldness was terrifying. She had not only killed Helena, but also psychologically destroyed Thomas, making him believe that he could have been responsible for his own wife's death. "And now you want to do the same thing to me." "You forced me to, dear. When you started asking the same questions Helena was asking, when you started awakening the same feelings in Thomas that I spent years trying to erase." Claire turned off the heat and turned completely to Amelia. "He was almost ready to give himself to me completely. A few more months, and I would have managed to make him forget Helena for good. But then you appeared. Thomas will never love you, not the way you want." "Yes, he will. When you disappear in the same mysterious way as Helena, when he realizes he can't trust anyone but me, when he understands that I'm the only person who has always been by his side, he'll have no choice." Claire moved closer, and Amelia could see madness shining in her eyes. It wasn't just ambition or obsessive passion. It was a cold, calculating psychopathy that had planned every move for years. "The difference is that this time it will be easier. You're just a maid without family, without anyone who's going to look for you. You'll simply disappear and everyone will think you ran away with some money stolen from the house." Amelia backed up until she hit the wall, but Claire kept approaching, holding a kitchen knife she had picked up from the counter. "The poison in the food is just a backup, in case you're smart enough not to eat. But I prefer more direct methods." The blade gleamed under the kitchen light. "It will be quick, dear. quicker than it was for Helena. It was at that moment that Amelia heard the sound that would change everything. The front door opening, and Thomas's heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor. He had returned early from his trip. Claire stopped, the knife still in her hand, quickly calculating her options. Amelia realized she had only seconds to act. "Thomas!" she shouted with all the strength she could gather. "She killed Helena. Claire killed your wife." The sound of footsteps accelerated, coming toward the kitchen. Claire looked at Amelia with a pure hatred that froze the young woman's blood. "You just made a very serious mistake," whispered Claire, raising the knife. But before she could attack, Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway, his eyes immediately going from the knife in Claire's hand to Amelia's terrified face. Time stopped. Thomas looked alternately at the knife in Claire's hand and at Amelia's pale face, trying to process the scene he had found. Claire, with the quickness of someone who had rehearsed this moment dozens of times, immediately changed her posture. "Thomas, thank God you arrived," she exclaimed, lowering the knife but not releasing it. "This girl has gone completely insane. She was trying to poison your food, and when I tried to stop her, she attacked me." "Lie!" shouted Amelia, tears running down her face. "She was the one putting poison in the food. She killed Helena, Thomas. I have the proof." Thomas remained motionless for a few seconds that seemed eternal. His eyes, usually so controlled, revealed a deep confusion, as if he were trying to decide which reality to believe. "Proof?" he repeated, his voice coming out hoarse. "In my room," Amelia said quickly. "Helena's letters, photographs, everything is hidden under my mattress. She discovered that you two were having an affair, discovered that Claire was slowly poisoning her." Claire laughed, a crystalline sound that echoed through the kitchen as if it were the most absurd thing she had ever heard. "Thomas, you see, it's exactly what I told you would happen. She's having the same kind of paranoid episode that Helena had. She's inventing fantastic stories to try to get close to you." Claire took a step in Thomas's direction, her voice gaining a calculated tone of concern. "Love, you know I would never harm Helena. She was my friend." "She wasn't your friend. You hated her because she was between you and Thomas." Amelia addressed him directly, completely ignoring Claire. "Listen, Thomas, please. Helena wrote everything down. She knew Claire had training in chemistry, knew she had access to all the family bank accounts, knew about your affair that had lasted for years." "What affair?" asked Thomas, but there was something in his tone of voice that suggested it wasn't a complete surprise. Claire perceived that she was losing ground. The victim mask began to slip, being replaced by something more desperate. "Thomas, you can't believe the words of a maid against me. How many years have we known each other? How many times have I been by your side when you needed me most?" She moved closer to him, trying to touch his arm, but Thomas instinctively moved away. "The proof," he said, looking fixedly at Amelia. "Where is the proof?" "I'll get it," said Amelia, but Claire blocked her path. "She's not going anywhere. Not until we resolve this situation." The knife reappeared, this time pointed directly at Amelia. "Thomas, this girl is clearly unstable. She could be dangerous." Claire put down the knife. Thomas's voice came out with an authority that didn't admit questioning. "I can't do that, not while she's spreading these lies." Claire was beginning to show signs of real desperation. "Thomas, you have to choose. Who do you trust more? Me, who has been by your side for 15 years, or a girl who appeared out of nowhere a few weeks ago?" It was at this moment that Amelia realized she had a single chance. If she didn't act now, Claire would manage to manipulate the situation once more. "You want to know the truth about that night?" she shouted to Thomas. "Claire was here. She wasn't in Chicago as she told the police. Helena discovered this and was going to tell everything. Claire poisoned her, and then scratched her own arm to make you believe that Helena had tried to hurt her before she died." Claire's reaction was immediate and revealing. Instead of denying the accusation, she lunged at Amelia with the knife, in an uncontrolled fury that confirmed everything the young woman had said. Thomas reacted by instinct, grabbing Claire's wrist and twisting until she released the weapon. The knife fell to the floor with a metallic sound that echoed through the silent kitchen. "It's true," he said, his voice coming out as a whisper laden with pain. My God, Claire, it's true. It's not what you're thinking, Claire said quickly, trying to compose herself. I was here, yes, but it was because Helena called me. She was having a crisis, threatening to hurt herself. I came to try to help. Lie. Thomas moved away from her as if she were radioactive. You killed Helena. You let me spend 12 years thinking I might have done something to her that night. You let me carry this guilt while planning to take her place. I love you, shouted. Claire, all composure, finally abandoned. I've always loved you, more than she ever did. Helena was a spoiled girl who didn't know how to value what she had. She was going to leave you, Thomas. She was going to ask for a divorce and take half of your assets. I saved you. You destroyed me. Thomas's voice was broken, carrying a pain that seemed physical. You destroyed my life, my sanity, my ability to trust anyone. Claire looked around desperately, like a cornered animal looking for a way out. Her eyes landed on the knife on the floor, then on Amelia, then on the back door of the kitchen. You won't be able to prove anything, she said, her voice recovering some of its previous coldness. Not after so much time, it's just her word against mine. Helena's letters, said Amelia. The photographs, the samples of poison she collected, it's all saved. Where? Claire asked, but there was a desperate urgency in the question. Amelia realized she shouldn't have revealed this information. Claire was still dangerous, still had much to lose. It doesn't matter where, said Thomas. The police will find everything. He picked up the phone that was on the counter. I'm going to call the sheriff's office now. No, you won't. Claire quickly bent down and picked up the knife, but this time she pointed it at her own throat. If you call the police, I'll kill myself right here, and you'll carry that guilt for the rest of your life. Claire, don't do this. Why not? You've already lost me anyway. At least this way you'll never know the complete truth. You'll never know all the details of what happened to Helena that night. You'll never have peace. It was emotional blackmail in its cruelest form. Claire was willing to die to continue, psychologically torturing Thomas. But Amelia had learned a lot about courage in the last few weeks. Without thinking twice, she lunged forward and grabbed Claire's wrist, fighting for control of the knife. The two women rolled across the kitchen floor in a desperate struggle that could end with the death of either of them. Thomas tried to intervene, but the movement was so fast that he ran the risk of being cut as well. It was Amelia who finally managed to dominate Claire, using the anger of all the days of fear and manipulation as fuel. When the knife finally left Claire's hand, it went far enough that neither of them could reach it. Claire remained on the floor, panting, defeated, but with her eyes still shining with hatred. You don't know what you just did, she said to Amelia. Thomas will never be able to truly love you. He'll always see Helena when he looks at you. He'll always wonder if you're not another liar, another manipulator. I destroyed his ability to trust, and that's something you two will never be able to rebuild. They were the words of a defeated woman, but they carried enough venom to plant seeds of doubt that could grow and destroy any chance of future happiness. The weeks that followed Claire's arrest were a whirlwind of police investigations, lawyers, journalists and media exposure that transformed the manor into a circus. Claire's confession, made in the desperate attempt at a final deal with the district attorney, revealed horrible details about Helena's murder and about other crimes she had committed over the years. Helena had been slowly poisoned with thallium, a heavy metal that caused symptoms that could easily be confused with stress or psychological problems. On the night of the death, Claire had drastically increased the dose, ensuring that Helena would die within a few hours. The body had been dissolved in acid at a rural property that Claire kept secret, registered in the name of a shell company. Thomas heard the details with a stone expression, but Amelia could see the pain accumulating in his eyes with each new revelation. 12 years of guilt and self-recrimination couldn't be erased overnight, even with the truth finally revealed. The manor, transformed into a place haunted by memories and ghosts of the past. Thomas walked through the corridors like a man lost in his own home, unable to find peace even after justice had been done. He had offered an obscene amount of money to Amelia as compensation for what she had gone through, but she had refused. What she wanted couldn't be bought. "I'm leaving," she said on a June morning, finding him in the library where he had spent most of his days since Claire had been arrested. This afternoon, Thomas raised his eyes from the papers he was pretending to read. It had been weeks since they had barely spoken, each dealing with their own demons in different ways. "Where to?" "Back to West Virginia. I'm going to help my grandmother with the small school she maintains in the town. I've always wanted to do that." He nodded as if already expecting this decision. "Makes sense, there's nothing for you here." "There is," she said, her voice coming out lower than she intended, "but you can't see it." Thomas closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was a vulnerability there that she hadn't seen since the night of the storm. "Amelia, I don't know how to live without carrying guilt. For 12 years it was guilt that kept me functioning. Now that it's gone, I don't know who I am." "You're a man who deserves to be happy, a man who has suffered enough." She approached the desk where he was sitting. "But you have to choose happiness. No one can do that for you." "What if Claire is right? What if I can never completely trust someone again? What if I always look for signs of betrayal where none exist?" "Then you'll live half a life." Amelia lightly touched his hand, and it was as if an electric current passed between them. "But it doesn't have to be that way." Thomas intertwined his fingers with hers, holding her hand as if it were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. "I don't know how to love without fear," he confessed. "I don't know how to give myself without expecting to be betrayed. Learn, with me, if you want." The silence that followed was laden with possibilities and impossibilities in equal measure. Amelia could see the struggle happening behind his eyes, the conflict between the desire to cling to her and the terror of becoming vulnerable again. "You deserve someone better," he said finally. "Someone who doesn't carry all this baggage, someone who can love you without reservations." "I don't want someone better. I want you, broken, scared, full of scars. I want you exactly as you are." The tears he had kept for weeks finally flowed, silent and liberating. Amelia moved closer and embraced him, letting him cry for the 12 lost years, for the woman he had loved and lost, for the time he had wasted living in guilt and solitude. "Stay," he asked against her hair. "Please stay. Only if you let me help you rebuild. Not the manor, not the business, you, the person you were before all this happened." "I don't remember who I was." "Then let's discover together who you can become." That night, for the first time in months, they dined together at the large table in the dining room, not as employer and employee, but as two people who had survived a storm and were learning to trust each other. Thomas told about his childhood at the manor, about the parents he had lost young, about the first years building the business empire that now meant very little to him. Amelia spoke about the grandmother who had raised her, about the dreams she had left behind when life became merely survival, about the strength she had discovered she had when she was forced to fight for her own life. "You know what scares me the most?" said Thomas as they walked through the garden under the starlight. "It's that part of me still feels guilt. Guilt for being here with you while Helena is dead. Guilt for feeling something that 12 years ago I thought I would never feel again." "Helena would want you to be happy. Anyone who truly loved you would." "How can you be sure?" "Because that's what true love does. It desires the good of the loved one, even when we can no longer be present to share in that happiness." They stopped near the rose bush that Helena had planted years ago and that continued to bloom despite the neglect. The white roses shone under the moonlight like small perfumed ghosts. "She planted this in the first year of our marriage," said Thomas, touching one of the petals with delicacy. "She said she wanted to leave something beautiful that would last longer than us." And it lasted. Despite everything, it lasted. "Do you think we can last too?" Amelia turned to face him completely, in the dark, with only the moonlight illuminating their faces. They seemed like two lost souls who had finally found their way home. "I think we can try. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one trust at a time." Thomas pulled her closer, his hands trembling slightly when they touched her face. It was the first truly intimate contact between them since the night of the storm. But this time, there was no confusion or misunderstandings. There were just two hearts that had survived the worst and were ready to try something new. The kiss was hesitant at first, laden with all the fears and hopes that neither of them had managed to verbalize. But when Amelia responded, when she gave herself completely to that moment, something unlocked in Thomas's chest. It was as if he were breathing deeply for the first time in 12 years. "I love you," he whispered against her lips, the words coming out as both a confession and a promise. "I love you too," she answered, and there was a certainty in those words that admitted no doubts or fears. They remained embraced in the garden until the first lights of dawn began to paint the sky pink and gold. It was the beginning of something new, built on the ruins of the past, but aiming at a future that finally seemed possible. 2 years later, the manor had completely transformed. The windows were always open, letting in the golden light of the Ewa, mountains and the perfume of the gardens that Amelia had resurrected with patience and love. The heavy silence that had dominated the property for more than a decade had given way to the sounds of life, laughter, music, conversations that extended deep into the night. The East Wing had been completely renovated and transformed into Amelia's office, where she coordinated an educational project that had become her passion, a school for low-income youth from the region, entirely financed by Thomas's fortune. The broken mirror had been removed and replaced by a large window that gave a view of the mountains, symbolizing the choice to look forward instead of living fragmented by the past. Thomas had changed in a way that surprised even himself. The therapy that Amelia had gently insisted he do had helped him process not only the guilt related to Helena's death, but also older traumas that had shaped his inability to fully trust people. He discovered that his tendency toward isolation came from long before the marriage, rooted in the premature death of his parents and the solitude of an adolescence that was rich but emotionally empty. "You saved my life," he said on a December morning, as he watched Amelia prepare breakfast in the kitchen that no longer held bad memories, not just from that night with Claire, but from a lifetime of fear. "We saved each other," she corrected, approaching to kiss his forehead. "I also needed to learn that I could be strong and vulnerable at the same time, that I could fight for myself without losing the ability to give myself completely." The wedding had happened 6 months ago, in a simple ceremony in the manor's garden, with just a few close friends and Amelia's grandmother, who had made the trip from West Virginia to see her granddaughter achieve what she called the love of a lifetime. There was no excessive luxury or ostentation, just 2 people publicly committing to the daily work of building a life together. The most remarkable transformation, however, was in the way Thomas had learned to talk about Helena, no longer as a painful obsession or a burden of guilt, but as an important part of his history that deserved to be honored without being idolized. On the first anniversary of her death after Claire's imprisonment, he and Amelia had planted a new rosebush in the garden, white like the original, but in a position where it received more sun and could grow more freely. "Helena taught me about first love," he said that day as he helped Amelia prepare the soil for the new plant. "You taught me about mature love, the love that chooses to stay even when it's difficult, the love that builds instead of just consuming." Amelia had learned not to feel jealous of those memories. Helena wasn't her rival. She was a woman who had been brutally murdered and who deserved to be remembered. With affection, not with bitterness. In fact, it had been Amelia who suggested they create a foundation in Helena's name to support women in abusive relationships, transforming the tragedy into something that could protect other lives. The news of the pregnancy came on an autumn afternoon when Amelia was returning from a visit to the school she coordinated in town. She had kept the secret for a few weeks, wanting to be absolutely certain before telling Thomas. When she finally revealed it, seeing his face transform from surprise to a pure and disarmed joy, she knew they had definitively closed the circle of healing. "A baby," he repeated, as if he couldn't believe it. "Our baby. Are you happy?" "I'm terrified and happy at the same time. Is it possible to feel both things together?" "It's possible, and it's normal. We'll learn together, like we've learned everything else." That night, lying in the bed they had chosen together to replace the old one, Thomas placed his hand on Amelia's still flat stomach and made a silent promise. This child would grow up in a house full of love, but also of honesty. He would know the story of his parents, including the difficult parts, but would grow up knowing that it's possible to survive the storms and still find happiness on the other side. "You know what's the most amazing thing?" said Amelia, observing Thomas's face relaxed by the first truly tranquil sleep he had had in years. 3 years ago, I was a lost girl who barely knew who she was. You were a destroyed man who thought he could never love again. And now we're a family," he completed, pulling her closer. "A family that chose healing instead of suffering, trust instead of fear, the future instead of the past." Outside, a storm was beginning to form over the mountains, but inside the manor there was only warmth, light, and the promise of a tomorrow that was finally worth waiting for. Claire was serving her sentence in a women's penitentiary in Chicago, and her last attempts to appeal the sentence had been denied. Occasionally, she still tried to send letters to Thomas, but they were intercepted by the lawyers and never reached him to cause distress. The past had found its place, honored where it deserved to be honored, buried where it needed to be buried, and transformed into wisdom where it could be useful. The present was full of purpose, love, and the satisfaction of lives that finally made sense, and the future stretched ahead like a wide, sunny road, full of possibilities that they would build together, one choice at a time. The next morning, when Amelia woke to the sound of rain that had fallen during the night, she found Thomas already standing on the veranda, observing the washed and brilliant gardens under the rising sun. He turned when he felt her approach, and the smile he offered her was something she never tired of seeing. Genuine, disarmed, full of a simple happiness that needed no explanation. "Good morning, my love," he said, enveloping her in his arms and spinning her until she laughed like a child. "Good morning," she answered, kissing him with the certainty of someone who knows that all nightmares were left in the past and that the future belongs entirely to them. The manor breathed around them, alive and renewed, a silent witness to a story that had begun in the shadows, but found the light.